This is the first episode of
The Purple Worm,
a podcast which features four of us merry old British people talking about RPGs. So, without further ado, I'll ask people to introduce themselves, plug your podcasts, etc. So, we'll start off with Pete Jones.
Hi, I'm Pete Jones and I run the Dragons Are Real podcast.
So, we will move on to someone who almost needs no introduction. Lock up your burning oil, it's Colin Green.
Hello there, yep, I'm Colin Green, aka Spike Pit.
Thanks very much, Colin. And next we have Dave Aldridge.
Cheers, John. So, I'm Dave Aldridge of the D Percentile podcast.
And lastly, there's myself. I'm John of the Red Dice Diaries blog and podcast. First of all, we're going to start off with just a couple of sort of little news snippets that we've gathered recently. First of all, we've got the fact that Old School Essentials by Gavin Norman of Necrotic Gnome have released a plain text version of their Old School Essentials rules. And Old School Essentials is effectively a rebranding of BX Essentials, which you're going to help me out here, guys, because I'm terrible when it comes to the various different editions of D&D.
It's BX.
It's BX, is it?
It's
right,
BX.
Splendid. I knew someone would know if I put it out there.
What do you guys make of that? He's obviously got a reason for it. Do you think it's just to sort of spread the popularity of his rewrite?
So I read that, Colin, as encouraging third-party creation. As a document, it loses a lot because one of the beautiful things to me about Old School Essentials is the layout. But I just saw it as great. I can rip from that to do third-party stuff.
Yeah, it's like a system reference document.
I think part of it is, when they first started doing like the OSR sort of games with like the OGL, Osric came out, and the original idea of that was, right, we want to create a tome where people can look at it and they know that anything in this book they can use in their products. I think the idea of this sort of document is to have a similar thing for Old School Essentials. So I think it's nice as a way of sort of both protecting anything that's got product identity for Necrotic Gnome, because obviously that wouldn't be in the sort of text document, but also it's a bit of protection for the person who goes like, oh yeah, I want to create like a sci-fi like mutant RPG using like Old School Essentials, and instead of having to like spend ages sort of tinkering around and going, oh, I'm not sure if I can use this, I've got emails back and forth, I can just go, right, I'm going to take this out of this document, I'm going to run with it and see what I can do.
Yeah, and also he sorted out a few of the ambiguities, hasn't he? Because I know that other people have done BX and that, but there's sort of different interpretations. This way, he's tried to be faithful to the original and get it so that everybody's got access to it and it's all seen off the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, I mean, I know sort of the original goals of BX Essentials, which have obviously been carried forward into the rebranded Old School Essentials. It was originally to stay faithful to the old rules, as you said, Pete. Also to lay them out in a way that makes sense and is easy for people to access, but also in cases where there are sort of more than one interpretation of the rules, he's tried to clear them up, but he's been very clear in the text, right? This is just my interpretation of this. Other interpretations certainly are possible.
It's interesting, I think, because Gavin's such a fanboy of BX as well. He's really gone in deep with it, and this is just the game that he plays. He plays this more or less with his home group.
Yeah.
And he's like really, he's got hold of it and run with it. I think people will be talking about OSC going on into the future. I don't think this is something that's going to be a flash in the pan.
You quite often hear about people, badly run Kickstarters, or no one knew what was going on, or it was past the deadlines, etc. Now, obviously, I've backed the Kickstarter, and there's been constant updates, beta documents, PDFs of the documents of all of the finished books pretty much have already gone out to everyone who's backed it. And I've got mine, advanced copies of like the extra books, like the Advanced Fantasy Rules and the Druid and Illusionist Spell book have already gone out to the backers. But also the Kickstarter's been so well planned that Gavin and his partner have recently had a baby girl, and we wish them all the best with that for health and happiness. But the Kickstarter's been so well planned that even the birth of their child hasn't interfered with the Kickstarter. It's still rolling along in the final stages, and I think that's a testament to all the work and effort that Gavin has put in.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to showcase how to run a Kickstarter properly, the way Gavin's done it. It's been top notch from start to finish, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So as I see it, it was all done, wasn't it? So the the Kickstarter ended. You got your PDF straight away. They were all ready. There was already some art in them. They were already beautifully edited. I think he tied them up a little bit, but I didn't spot much. And he's just waiting for the art. I thought that's fantastic. Yeah, John, can I bung in a quick discussion point, because I backed this Kickstarter. There's a little bit of hype around it. I backed the Kickstarter because I thought, fine, I will buy into Old School Essentials, and that will be my reference point for Old School. That will be my go-to system. So if I release something, I want to say it's Old School compatible or whatever, I'll just go to that. What do people think about that as a go-to system?
I've run BX Essentials, like the forerunner of it. And to be honest, the only reason I've not run Old School Essentials is because I've not got time to squeeze another game in. But yeah, I can certainly see it becoming it'll be either that or probably delving deeper for my sort of go-tos in the future.
Yeah, I think my intention was to back this because I knew he was bringing out a nice set of well-produced little books. I went for the box set so that I knew with the follow-on books that he's doing, I could get a few more in the box. I've got something modular. I can hack bits in, pull bits out. Right out of the gate, I thought, yeah, this will just be my go-to kind of BX, my old school D&D type of vibe game. Black Hack is another old school game for me, but it's not the same thing in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me as well, one of the advantages of the OSR sort of games is, even if I buy an OSR book and I'm probably not going to run this 100% as it is, because they're all broadly compatible, there are always elements I can take out of books to use in whatever OSR system I'm running. And now, to be honest, you can do that with any game if you're willing to put the effort in. But because of this bedrock of compatibility in OSR games, it makes it a lot easier. And I think the fact that they're making Old School Essentials available for third-party products via their licensing and the text version of it, I think that's a great thing as far as I'm concerned, because it means that hopefully in the future we will see people bringing out their products for Old School Essentials. And yeah, don't get me wrong, in the same way as when the D20 OGL license came out, not all of those products were golden, we all know that. But if you take the time to sift through it, almost like you're panning for gold, you will find some good stuff in there.
I think the way you did it as well, where you can plug in, so if you want your advanced rules, you can plug them in. If you want sci-fi rules, the separate books. I think it was quite a cute way to give some more legs to it as well.
The clever thing about those advanced rules as well, it is advanced basic. So it's keeping BX, but bringing in advanced classes. So you don't get what I see as a lot of the nonsense from AD&D.
Yes.
He's BXified AD&D, and I thought the way he'd done it, I did a bit of play testing with it, ran through a couple of adventures with him, and I thought I was impressed, because initially I saw advanced and I thought, I'm not interested. But playing it, I did a U-turn.
That's a big attraction for me as well, because I mean, I played. I had someone run some D&D 3.5 at the weekend, and it's been years since I've played 3.5. And don't get me wrong, it was a great game, had great fun. Not ragging on the system or anything, because I genuinely did enjoy myself. I've enjoyed playing 3.5 an awful lot over the years. But as I was playing it, there was some bits of it, when you're generally counting, you're jotting down your skill points and whatever, where I was like, oh, we're only playing for 2 nights over a weekend. It's a bit of a faff. Can we not just jump in and crack on? Whereas, like you say, looking at the Old School Essentials advanced stuff, like you say, it is, and having seen sort of Gavin's notes and stuff as he's been going along, it has very much been what classes do we like out of AD&D and that sort of thing. Then how can we pair them back and yet still make them different enough from the basic classes that they're worth playing? And I think that's a great thing, because it's not going to be a case of, someone wants to play a paladin and you're like, oh right, now I've got to learn like a swathe of like new rules to go with it. It's still simple. You're playing a paladin, boom, on with the game. Right, I think if no one has anything else to say on that, we should probably move on to our second point.
Kevin Crawford.
Yeah, Kevin Crawford, who did Silent Legion and Stars Without Number, he's opened up a Kickstarter for his OSR game Wolves of God, Adventures in Dark Ages England. And in a similar starter, as we were saying about with Gavin with his Kickstarter, pretty much he's already got like a beta document, so all the layout is pretty much there, like most of the material is there. It's just like some of the artwork's not there. So as soon as you signed up to the Kickstarter, as I did, because I'm quite a big fan of Kevin Crawford's, it was like, here's a link to the Google Drive. Share the link if you want, even with people who've not backed the Kickstarter. If you see any mistakes, let me know.
Yeah, I've looked at Kevin Crawford's stuff, and I know you play Stars Without Number for sure, John.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave, or Pete?
I haven't played any of it, but on lots of different recommendations, I got hold of Stars Without Number, and he is the king of the random tables, as you've said before, Colin. So what about Wolves of God? I mean, Dark Ages England. I associate actually random tables with quirky, surprising. So is this a pretty straight Dark Ages England? Is this, what do we know?
It seems to have a fairly sort of serious tone to it. I've not had a chance to sort of like do like a deep dive into it yet, but it seems to focus a lot on, obviously there was a lot of it was like a bit of a cultural sort of melting pot around the sort of time that was covered. You know, there was various different ethnicities coming into England, and they're all sort of thrown together. Some were conquerors, some were conquered. It is very clearly an OSR style game. I mean, certainly with Stars Without Number and Silent Legions, it's very much taking that sort of OSR chassis, if you will, and then sort of like building extra stuff on top of it. So Stars Without Number's got a skills system. It's got like they call them foci, but effectively they're feats sort of system on top of it. But one of the things, I think for me, Kevin Crawford sort of manages, one of the few people who successfully skirts that line between making it a little bit more complicated to give you more options. But for me, he never really steps over that line to making it too needlessly complicated. So it's like science fiction games can be notorious for it. You've got like all your technology, you've got cybernetics, you've got space travel, you've got space battles. All of that can like result in a ridiculous amount of like extra rules. And there are extra rules in Stars Without Number, but they never feel like they're sort of overwhelming the rest of the game, if you know what I mean.
I've always found with this stuff that even if you don't play the game, there's a wealth of material there to mine for your own games.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I pretty much as soon as it came out, I backed the Wolves of God. Is there's always a lot of material to support sandbox play in Kevin Crawford stuff. So if you look in Stars Without Number, there's tables in there almost like the old sort of Traveller Star stuff. You know, you can generate your sectors and your different galaxies and stuff like that. And there's for anyone who's playing Stars Without Number, there's a great like online website called Sectors Without Number, which just automates using all of those tools, which I know Johannes, who runs our Stars Without Number game, uses that, and you can sort of show the players a copy and then click on like a little star map and get information about stuff. And that's absolutely great. And I know Silent Legions was his sort of his like Cthulhu horror OSR game, but one of the things he said at the start of that was, by now everyone who's involved in roleplay knows at least something about the Cthulhu mythos. So the idea in that is you don't use the traditional like Cthulhu stuff. He gives you like tools to create your own.
That's pretty cool. I'll have to have a look at that because I think, you know, I mean, I know craft, but I'm often wary of the whole mythos lore. You know, am I doing it right for my players? And that would give you license to create your own lore.
Yeah, because I've always played Cthulhu without knowing hardly anything about the mythos, which is quite entertaining because I never know any of the beasties or any of that. So it's all a big surprise to me. And I actually ran Books and Bullets, which was Ray Otis. He did an interpretation of his Cthulhu thing. And yeah, you just make up your own weirdness, but it would be nice to have a toolbox like that. And what Pete says, how you can use tables from Kevin Crawford's stuff in your other games, that is so true.
One of the other good things that's in Stars Without Number is there's like a faction system in it, which is mainly sort of GM facing, and the idea is you can use this system to sort of loosely define like the main factions in your game. So you might be like, oh, we've got like an evil empire over here, and we've got the rebels over here, or whatever. If you give it a bit of a Star Wars flavour, and then it basically the way that works is so every like 4 games or whatever, the GM can take a faction turn, and you make a few rolls for the different factions based on like what their goals are and what resources they have. So let's say you make a roll for the rebels. They're trying to steal something off like the evil empire, and you go, oh, they've been successful, but they've taken heavy losses. If the players then like, interact with the rebels in the next session, you know exactly what's going on, and you can pretty much reskin that to use it in any game.
Yeah, I'd like reskinning monsters in old school games, because you find that your players always know what the monsters do as soon as they see them. Oh, they know this is a cobalt and this is what they're going to do. But if you switch it around and give the monster they know different stats, it throws them then and catches them off guard. And if you can do that with Cthulhu, then these people who are into their Cthulhu stuff not going to know what they're dealing with, and more importantly, don't know how to defeat the damn thing.
Picked up on a couple of little segues there, going into perhaps what we're doing currently. Is anybody actually running any Cthulhu type of thing? No.
No,
I'm not. No.
See, it's weird because I say no, but a lot of my games have sort of mythos elements in them, whether they're like Cthulhu games or not.
Yeah, so the CSI Midlands, and you were mentioning factions. That was another segue. The factions from Stars Without Number weren't that an inspiration for some of the things you're doing in CSI?
It was, yeah. I mean, I've not had a chance to sit down and like write it all out just because of work and stuff. You know how it is, but it's a faction system where it's very easy to reskin. It's like, so let's say one of the factions in Stars Without Number has an asset where it's like, oh, it's got some battle hardened like space marines or whatever as one of their assets. It's not difficult to say, right, I'll take the same thing and they're just battle hardened, heavily armoured fantasy warriors.
That's very cool. And you can let it, to a certain extent, depending on how lazy you are, you could probably let that run your campaign for you.
Yeah, I mean, I know the purpose of it within Stars Without Number is obviously in a sci-fi game, you've not just got the one world that you're dealing with. Potentially you've got like hundreds of worlds. So it's not always possible to sort of drill into them in the same detail you might do if you just got like the one fantasy world to focus on. Whereas if it's not important, things just tend to get left in the background. But by using that system, even if you don't know exactly what each of like the Imperial worlds are up to, if you know that the Empire is doing like a big military drive to try and like quash the rebels, you know that that's going to sort of trickle down and affect any Imperial worlds that the players are visiting.
This makes me think of something that Dave might have something to say about. In your game with Johannes, John, you're playing Stars Without Number.
That's correct.
Now, do you see the kind of fingerprints of the randomness?
Well, I mean, I think Johannes, when he runs the game, he's never denied the fact that he's doing these faction turns. We're aware they're going on, and one of the ways we tend to see this is sort of like every few games or so, between games, he's got like a little Facebook group set up for it, because we'll pick up like bounties and like jobs and stuff like that, and like bulletin boards and whatever on space stations. We'll get sort of like little like news stories that he posts up, or like it'll be like, you know, you might find out that like a particular like religious sect has come to prominence on a particular world, or you might find out that this notorious like pirate has raided an Imperial base on such and such a world. And obviously some of those might be pre-planned. I'm sure a fair few of them aren't, but not sort of knowing that really doesn't lessen the sort of enjoyment we get from that, because quite often you'll deal, because the factions are established, you might like do a few jobs for a particular faction, then when they pop up again like later on, you're like, oh yeah, I made that contact for them when I smuggled them weapons through onto that agri world for them. Maybe I can like tap up my contact and get like a bit of the lowdown on what's going on with this whole like planetary blockade that this story says they're getting involved in. And it's nice because it gives you a lot of options that you can sort of go, right, we're going to head off and we're going to investigate this. But the GM's never really just sort of like oh right, you're just heading off in space. I don't really know what you're going to do, because he's got that little basis where even if it's just made up, he's got a little bit of a jumping off point.
I always find if the players have some choice on it, then they're more invested, as opposed to this is the route I want you to go down, deal with it.
Yeah, so I'm really drawn to the idea of increasingly just the idea of a procedurally generated sandbox. I mean, Colin will laugh because I'm running King of Dungeons at the moment, and King of Dungeons is not that game. But one of the games I'm playing in, shout out to Larry, Follow Me and Die. I'm playing in his Delving Deeper game, and that's what he's told us he's doing. So he's told us not only has he generated his mega dungeon using all the tables he can get his hands on, also in the session, if he hasn't planned it, he does it on the spot. And that's it. It's really nice knowing that. And, I wonder how different the experience at the player end is from an experience where he'd really, really carefully contrived it. But certainly that's the game that I want to run at some point using, it couldn't be one system. I'd want to pull all the tools together from all the different systems and using something like the Black Hack to, a nice nimble system to cope with whatever came up.
I mean, I'm a big fan of that sort of game because as a GM, for me, I love it when the players do something not like so much like out of character or just like random, but they do something unexpected. Because then it keeps me on my toes, and obviously if everything's pre-scripted down to the nth degree, that there's no spontaneity for me. There's no like interest. It's just me going step one, and then this happens, and then step two, and then this, and so on and so forth. So I mean, it's one of the, obviously not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons I enjoy running things in like the Midlands so much, because it's set like a fantasy version of a Britain. I know enough about Britain that if the players are just suddenly like, oh yeah, we want to go off and visit like the equivalent of Birmingham, I'll be like, right, I can run with that, and I can sort of bluff my way through it. Whereas I think in some games I may not be as confident. I mean, I'd do it, but I may not be as confident with it. So I think it's great for Stars Without Number, and I'm sure with this Wolves of God when it comes out, the fact that there's those tools there to support that, because it's a bit of a confidence boost to the GM, because if you go, you can be like, oh well, do you know what? Even if the player characters go, I'm just going to go to like whatever random star system it is. If you needed to, you could have a quick roll on the faction table or a quick roll on the system creation table, and you'd be like, right, great, I've got a starting point, and now I know what I can run with, and I can just go with it.
So I've got a question for you then, guys. Would you go as far as to say, okay, you open a door, there's a combat, and whoa, you manage to slay the dragon, hands thrown up in the air? Would you actually turn to the players and say, right, now we're going to roll on treasure table T, and we're going to just totally meta game out the treasure, so everybody fully knows that before this combat went down, there was absolutely sod all on paper. This treasure hoard is coming into focus right now. I've never done that. I've always thought it would be quite interesting and maybe fun, but I worry that some players would be like, oh, hold on, that's your job to work all that out. What?
It does depend on the group a bit, but I mean, if it's a group of habit, I mean, as you know, in the last Midlands game we ran, when you had we had Ian's character, and he was like shouting out the name of his like lost love in the monster infested dungeon, then in the sort of underdog basically, and I was like, oh, I'll make that wandering monster roll then. Oh yeah, you hear like heavy footfalls coming towards you, and I was like, oh, it's a big dumb ogre with a loincloth and a club coming around the corner to see what the noise is about. And then when you guys killed him, I was quite happily like, right, I'm sure you've guessed that was a wandering monster. Going to roll on these random treasure chambers. Oh, it appears to have a giant diamond tucked in his prison pouch somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, all games are gamey at some point, aren't they? And that's always going to come up. But I would like the idea of running a game with that understood. I've got hold of a lovely bit of technology. I've got hold of Goblin's Henchman's. He's got a table for generating a labyrinth crawl, and I'm going to use that. And so we're going to roll to see where the players go, and it's completely randomly generated. And everybody around the table has signed up for that. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, that should be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the result of that is.
I was just going to shout out Goblin's Henchman. He's got some wicked stuff.
I was going to say one of the things I do like about the procedurally sort of like dice roll generated stuff as well is it does reinforce that idea of like the dice as sort of like a neutral arbiter. As with everybody in the world, we've all got like our own sort of like biases, our own sort of leanings when it comes to like role-playing games and other things. And there's a danger that even subconsciously, some of that might leak into my prep. Whereas a dice, unless it's weighted, doesn't have like any bias. Unless you're sort of skewing the odds with your results, the dice doesn't have any sort of bias. It's just a random number that determines something.
And that's why I've always liked rolling my dice in the open in front of my players all the time. Don't have a screen. The dice are where they fall, and I always give them the option. Look, you might fight this, but if you want to run away, that's up to you. But I'm rolling my dice, and you've got to live with the results.
I notice you're playing in a face-to-face 5e game, John, as am I.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems, well, not so long ago, the random table had fell well out of favour, and we've got all this business of CR checks and difficulty and encounter balance and all of that. I've got a niggling feeling that a lot of that was about selling big books, because if you do something off random tables, you can't write reams of stuff to sell.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, let's say you do like a book for generating like treasure and loot hauls, and you go, right, here's 20 tables or whatever that generate your treasure. If you've got enough variety in there, that book's all you need.
It's infinite.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more. It's infinite. You can't sell them anything else.
Yeah, the number of options is vast. Whereas if you go like, oh, I've wrote down 20 specific treasures, then like in a few months' time, you can go, oh, now comes Treasure Book 2 with another 20 individual treasures.
Yeah. And the super cool thing about the Black Hat treasure tables is the encouragement to, you give out one of the spiffy ones. Well, put a line through it, write another one in.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. Don't bother to do your paragraphs of description. This character, the shopkeeper, the shop. Much better to have your one page, all the dice. Something that's happening when you come in the shop. 6 options. Six special offers that might be in the shop. You are done. And there's a nice surprise for everyone, and you get all the details you want. So I never bother with that stuff anymore. Just a batch of random.
I think as well. You're rightly saying, Dave. I mean, charts are a useful shortcut.
Are you playing Lamentations of the Flame Princess, isn't you, Pete?
Yeah, that's right. I'm running the Stonehell Mega Dungeon.
Ah, so is that quite random table?
No, it's not random at all. It's all predetermined. But there's a good flavour to the dungeon, so there is a story behind it. I don't know whether the players work out what the story is, but there's certainly a story behind it.
And what do you think of Lamentations? I quite like it.
There's a bit of a downer in the hobby, I think, because of James Raggy at the moment. And if you actually look at the Lamentations book, it's not a horror book. Yeah, there's horror art in it. The horror really is in the supplements. I think he's got a good base system, and even if you don't want to play Lamentations, I think the encumbrance system he devised. It's one of the few encumbrance systems I've ever used in an OSR game.
Yeah, I mean, I know for myself, sort of like when I first heard about it, I was put off it for a long time. So whenever you mentioned it, you tend to get one of two responses. You either get people being like, oh no, it's all sort of graphic and lewd and crude, and or you get people who are like, oh, it's so metal, blah. Neither of which sort of like appealed to me. So I was put off it for ages. But when I actually finally looked at it, as you say, Pete, aside from the artwork, which, to be honest, you can buy the artwork free version for like nothing on PDF if you want. Aside from the artwork, it is just a very simple, very playable version of D&D, and a lot of the sort of extreme, in inverted commas, sort of stuff is mainly in the supplements. Which, to be fair, if you want to buy Lamentations of the Flame Princess and just use Swords and Wizardry supplements or original like BX supplements, there is literally no reason why you cannot do that.
I'm the other way round. I mean, I've got nothing against the core rules. I think I own them. I've never really spent any time with them. I do enjoy the supplements. I found them amusing. I bought a big batch of them recently. There was a big discounted batch. But I'd been given a couple as presents actually from a gaming group a few years ago, and I find them amusing.
Oh yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of the supplements myself. I mean, like Broodmother Sky Fortress is one of my favourite supplements, but I can certainly see why they wouldn't be to everyone's taste. So I do think it gets a bit of an unfair rap, but I do think, to be honest, James pretty much like sort of courts that because it's part of the image of the game, and it helps sell the product and whatever.
Right.
And to be fair, he's like most games companies, he's running a business, so you gotta sell them
People
books.
are talking about him all the time, so
Yeah,
it
exactly.
keeps his name in the press, doesn't it?
That's it. No publicity is bad publicity, as I say.
No.
Yeah, I find it an interesting one, a strange one. Maybe we're getting into the main topic. Would you call it weird? I don't. He markets it as the weird RPG, doesn't he, or something like that? Weird fantasy.
Weird fantasy, yeah. I think in the core book, maybe in one or two places, like for instance the rules for the summoning spell, it's a lot more involved in Lamentations.
It's about 2 or 3 pages, isn't it?
Yeah, and you what you basically do is you go, right, I'm trying to summon an entity of approximately this power level because I think I can probably control that. You make a roll to summon it. You might get something a bit more powerful. You might get something a bit less powerful.
Oh, okay. That's Ron Edwards' Sorcerer, isn't it? That's the core. That's the core concept of Sorcerer. As you were describing that, I'm thinking if you want weird, then it's Dungeon Crawl Classics, isn't it? I mean, Dungeon Crawl Classics does every spell and has your constant zany elements. So I'm not sure if Lamentations is the weirdest or even particularly weird.
I think a lot of the supplements are trying to sort of like push that weird envelope a bit further. But in order to sort of have a baseline that you can then move off from and sort of go, right, we're going to do this and we're going to make this like weird extra bit, you've got to have like a sort of a solid core to set off from in the first place. Well, that's it for our first episode. Join us next time when we continue to talk about some of the weirder or stranger games that we've played. So until we see you then, take care and watch out for that purple worm.